Hello, everyone.
Tonight, we are walking barefoot into a marshland older than memory where the air is thick, warm, and somehow humming with sound, not the chirp of birds or the buzz of insects, but deep, resonant tones that vibrate your ribs like a far-off foghorn. Through the mists, shadows shuffle behind tall ferns. One of them stops and exhales a note pure, low, musical. You freeze. This isn't just a noise, it's a signal, a language, a performance. And the creature making it has a crest on its head that looks like the love child of a saxophone and a ram's horn. You've just stepped into the chorus of the late Cretaceous and you probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a shallow stream lit silver by moonlight, pushing aside reeds taller than yourself. Everything here seems to breathe. There are no streetlights, no campfires, just bioluminescent spores on the bark of fallen tree trunks and the occasional ripple of water as something enormous shifts just out of sight. The air is too warm for comfort and carries the scent of wet moss, sulfur, and ancient breath. Then it begins. A low, mournful tone rises from the marsh. It starts as a hum but lengthens and curves upward into something melodic like a cello slowly awakening. You duck instinctively. Another one answers higher pitched and farther east. The calls cross each other intertwining like wind in a tunnel. You're in a wetland amphitheater, and the headliners are dinosaurs. The creatures remain mostly hidden, their bodies darkened by mud mist and shadow, but their music gives them away. The closest one lets out another call, and you spot the faint movement of a Lambiosaurus, a tall, duck-billed herbivore with a massive hollow crest arching back over its head. The sound, it turns out, is not from the mouth, but from deep within that horn-like skull extension. Its voice isn't just a vocalization, it's architecture. Sound routed through chambers of air, twisted and amplified like an organic trumpet. And somehow each one has a different tune. Researchers today believe those crests acted like resonating chambers capable of producing distinct frequencies, almost like a barcode of sound. Each dinosaur's skull could play its own song, a signature melody that echoed across the valley. Historians still debate whether they used it more for communication, mating, or navigation in the dark. But you standing knee-deep in prehistoric sludge are starting to understand it's all of the above. The odd thing is there's rhythm to it. The calls don't just burst randomly, they follow a pattern. You realize the Lambiosaurs are taking turns, each note falling between the reeds and bouncing back against the water, creating ripples that shimmer under the moon. A female in the distance responds with a shorter, sharper reply. The one closest to you hesitates. It's like watching someone try to text back but losing their nerve. And just when it gets too quiet, a frog the size of a dinner plate leaps onto your leg and croaks violently in your face. You swat it away naturally, and it lands with a splash, startling one of the Lambiosaurs, which lets out a panicked honk that sounds suspiciously like a harmonica being stepped on. So much for majestic mystery. The flock herd band, whatever you want to call them, starts shifting. You hear the trampling of vegetation and the occasional snap of a branch. Then from deeper in the marsh comes the oddest note, yet a long trembling warble, almost like a didgeridoo played underwater. You can feel it in your teeth. The source, a larger Lambiosaurus, older by the look of its slower movement and paler scales. Its crest is dented in one place like an old wind instrument that's been dropped too many times, but when it calls, the others fall silent. This one's the conductor, or maybe the oracle. Somehow the younger ones respond not with sound but with motion, dipping their heads, vibrating their throats silently. It's a whole other layer of communication. You realize this world was never silent, just tuned to a frequency most of us forgot how to hear. One Lambeosaurus passes within 3 meters of you unaware or uncaring. You feel the breath from its nostrils, a moist exhale that smells like rotting figs and pond water. You barely suppress a sneeze. It freezes, then emits a quick toot of uncertainty like a kazoo in therapy. Another answers this time with what you swear sounds like passive aggression. You laugh, quietly, then bite your lip. You're not supposed to be here. There's a theory that the Lambeosaurus use sound not just to communicate with each other, but to deter predators, like a musical force field. The deep resonance of their calls may have disoriented carnivores or at least alerted the entire marsh to danger. One paleontologist compared it to a submarine sonar, sending out pulses, then waiting to hear what bounces back. But here's a weirder fact for your sleep-deprived brain. In 2013, a scientist tried recreating a Lambeosaurus crest using 3D printing and then blew air through it. It worked. It actually made noise. So yes, the ancient music might still be playable if you've got a good lung capacity and no shame. Back in the marsh, the chorus is winding down. One by one, the musical calls grow fewer, slower, softer. The younger ones nestle into banks of ferns and mud. A final call rises, then fades into a breeze that smells of mildew and memory. Somewhere behind you, something snaps a twig. You don't turn around. The herd's retreat into silence doesn't last. Just before dawn, while you're still crouched between a crumpled log and a patch of ferns that hum ever so slightly in the wind, a single note breaks the air, low, shaky, almost embarrassed. Like someone clearing their throat before a big speech. You look up and catch the source, a juvenile Lambeosaurus no taller than you are. Its crest is stubby, not yet fully developed, more of a ridge than a horn, but it's trying. It leans its head back, nostrils flaring, and lets out a sound that can only be described as a wet trombone solo at a kindergarten recital. It's awkward. It's weirdly endearing. It's loud. The call echoes clumsily across the open pond, bouncing off trees and rock outcrops before dissolving into the morning mist. The juvenile looks around proud and a little confused, like it's surprised the noise came from itself. And then something answers back. But it's not what it expected. A low, guttural hiss crackles from the opposite side of the water throw tire wetter, and with zero musical ambition. You freeze. So does the young Lambeosaurus. Because while its call was meant to attract a mate or maybe an older peer, what it actually did was send an engraved invitation to whatever sharp-toothed nightmare lives in the reeds. The juvenile bolts, and you don't blame it. That hiss wasn't coming from one of its own. But before you follow, you pause. You were here to study how that crest works, and for once you saw it up close. When the juvenile exhaled, its throat inflated like a balloon and forced air through the hollow crest's winding passageways. That bizarre note, it wasn't random. It had structure. The sound depended on the length, shape, and even internal ridges of the crest. Scientists call this cranial resonance, and it's as if the dinosaur's skull was part vocal cord, part musical instrument. Historians still debate whether these crests were tuned over generations by evolution for practical communication, or if they were more of a showy flourish for mating displays. Think prehistoric bagpipes, but hornier. Literally, a rustle pulls you back to the now. A massive tail brushes the ferns a few meters away. The hiss comes again closer this time. The juvenile isn't alone anymore. You crouch lower. From between the reeds emerges a predator, not massive but sleek and coiled like a whip, with slitted eyes and a snout that twitches with every breath. You don't recognize the species, but you'd bet your future dental plan it's a troodontid, a cunning bird-like carnivore with a habit of ambush hunting. And the eerie part, as it advances, it makes a soft chirping sound that eerily mimics the juvenile's earlier call. Not quite perfect, but close enough to make you wonder if this predator has been listening for a long, long time. It inches closer to the muddy shore where the juvenile stood just moments ago. No sign of the little herbivore, now probably ducked into a burrow or under the roots. Smart move. You, on the other hand, are still in full view. The troodontid cocks its head. Its eyes flick in your direction, and then with unsettling calm it emits another fake crest call. You swear the tone changes slightly more desperate this time, like a frightened adolescent trying to reconnect. You've seen birds do this mimicry. Lyrebirds in Australia can imitate chainsaws and camera shutters. Some parrots in captivity learn to cry like babies, just to mess with people. Evolution's weird and sometimes mean. You slide backward into the reeds, trying not to ripple the water. Behind you, the herd begins to stir again. You hear one of the older lambeosaurs blow a sharp, controlled note of warning. The marsh is a symphony, but sometimes the orchestra turns into an alarm system. Another lambeosaurus responds deeper and more urgent. A chain reaction begins. You're surrounded by overlapping tones, each one layered like harmony in a choir, but with rising tension. The troodontid hears it too. It glances toward the herd, then back towards you. And then it vanishes into the fog. Not even a splash. You don't exhale until the last of the eerie mimicry fades, replaced by more familiar calls. Some irritated, some relieved, some just going through the motions like an exhausted band, tuning up after a bad gig. As the sun rises behind the ferns, a golden light pours across the water, glinting off the lambeosaur's scaly hides. One by one they emerge from hiding, shake off the night's worries, and resume whatever it is giant duck-billed musicians do when they're not being hunted. You trail the juvenile again, now reunited with what appears to be its mother. She's larger, more graceful, and walks with the slow, steady rhythm of something that's learned the timing of danger. She dips her head toward her child and emits a gentle, almost laughable sound, like blowing across the top of a soda bottle. The juvenile mimics it. Badly. The mother tries again. This time the pitch shifts up, gentler, melodic. The juvenile matches it a little more closely. You smile. There's teaching happening here. Not instinct, not just survival, music as inheritance. Here's your oddball fact for the road. Some modern birds like the zebra finch learn their songs from their parents in stages, starting with nonsense sounds before developing full phrases. Sound familiar? The mother and child wade into the reeds, heads tilted toward each other, murmuring their flute-toned secrets. You wonder how many different messages those crests can carry. Danger, joy, hunger, homesickness, and as they vanish into the foliage, you hear one last note drift through the air. Pure short high, like a question mark blown on wind. It lingers. You spend the next hour trying to follow the juvenile's path, but the reeds keep closing behind it like gossiping neighbors. Every sound around you has a source, and every source has a shadow, some slow, some slithering. You move carefully, quietly, unsure if you're tracking or being tracked. Then it happens again. A tone rings out, shrill, youthful, trembling with effort. The same juvenile. You freeze. But this time the call is met with a response. Not from its mother, not from a predator, but from a second juvenile. The two calls bounce across the clearing like kids playing with walkie-talkies. One rises in pitch, the other answers with a warble. You smile, even chuckle softly, and then the third sound joins. Not a lambeosaurus, it starts low, mimicking their cadence, almost like, well, have you ever heard someone try to fake a dialect and completely overshoot it? That's what this is. A poor impersonation of the second juvenile's voice, but loud, guttural, and dripping with malicious intent. The calls stop. You can almost hear the fear settle. There's a crackle in the underbrush. The second juvenile bursts out from the reeds in a panic. You catch a glimpse of its eye, wide with terror, the sheen of water clinging to its scales. And right behind it, something fast. Low to the ground, not huge, but hungry. The mimic was bait, and the trap is closing. You leap sideways as the predator lunges, missing the juvenile by inches and landing in the shallows with a splash. The water turns brown. Mud and feathers fly. The young lambeosaurus stumbles, then scrambles uphill, crest buzzing like an emergency horn. Its tone is pure chaos, off rhythm, rapid fire, and sharp. You'd compare it to a synth meltdown if that wouldn't ruin your Dino Street cred, but it works. The herd hears. A symphony of sound erupts. Imagine for a moment a chorus of brass instruments played by panicked giants. Low notes, shaking your spine, high, trills slicing the air. The forest reacts, birds scatter, mammals duck into burrows. And whatever that predator was, it stops moving. Either it's gone deaf or it suddenly remembers a very important appointment elsewhere. You press yourself against a tree trunk as the herd moves fast and wide. The older lambeosaurs surround the two juveniles, their crests pointed outward, emitting defensive tones in synchronized pulses. This isn't just communication, it's choreography. Historians still debate whether the Lambeosaurus used this kind of organized acoustic defense regularly, or if it was just instinct in rare moments, but in this clearing, it's working like a sonic shield. And here's where it gets weirder. The adults don't just blast sound randomly, they switch frequencies. You can hear it. One goes low, another goes high. Then both drop into the same tone for 3 beats. It's like they're harmonizing or correcting each other mid-performance. If you weren't so busy trying not to get trampled, you'd be clapping. The predator retreats, slinking backward into the reeds, its mimicry no match for the full band experience of adult lambeosaurs calling as one. The juveniles press closer together, now quiet. Even their breathing seems synced. You inch closer just to get a better look. That's when you notice something strange. The shape of each adult's crest is slightly different. Not random. Stylized. Like instruments from different families, trombones, tubas, oboes. Some long and thin, others wider at the base. It hits you, this herd doesn't just communicate with sound, it curates it. Modern-day scientists have speculated that crests may have helped identify individuals or subgroups within a species. Kind of like team jerseys, but sonic. And if that's true, then this wasn't just defense. It was a roll call, a verification, a census by concert. Somewhere behind the group you hear a fourth tone. Soft, slow, measured. The leader. The elder Lambeosaurus steps forward, its massive body seeming to glide through the herd like a ship cutting water. It lets out one clean note so pure it silences the rest. Even the wind stops. You feel your ears ring in the aftermath. That was no warning. That was a command. And then just like that, the herd relaxes. Heads lower, tails drop. A few start chewing on leaves again. Crisis over, show's done. You take a breath, then another. Somewhere in the distance, a pterosaur shrieks like an off-key kazoo. Mood officially ruined. But you're still thinking about that fake call the mimic. It sounded real. Real enough to fool a juvenile, at least. Here's your odd fact of the hour. There's a bird in the Amazon rainforest that can imitate the sound of a baby crying, a jaguar, growling, and a chainsaw all within the same minute. The superb lyrebird in Australia can recreate camera clicks and car alarms. Nature doesn't just produce great mimics, it gives them jobs. You wonder how long that predator's been studying the crests. And you wonder how long the crests have been studying right back. As you follow the herd toward higher ground, one of the juveniles turns back and gives a quick half-note tweet. A thank you. A warning. A nervous habit. It doesn't matter. You hum it back badly, of course. And for just a second, the whole valley hums with you. The sun rises reluctantly, as if unsure whether it wants to be part of the scene. You climb a ridge of packed mud and fossil roots, wiping sweat from your forehead with a sleeve already soaked in ancient pond juice. The Lambeosaurus herd is ahead, moving slowly but deliberately. The adults aren't grazing, they're pacing, listening, preparing. You crest the hill and stop short. Below the valley is filled with fog. Dense, and rippling in places like breath caught between two worlds. And from somewhere deep in that mist, the sound. Not one, not even a few, dozens, maybe more. You crouch low as the herd gathers at the edge. The Lambeosaurs test the air with their nostrils, and then on some unspoken cue, One of the adult males raises its head and sings. A long, resonant tone, steady and warm like blowing across a giant conch shell submerged in honey. Another answers, then another, and then all of them. Each crest sends its song into the mist like a torch in a cave. The sound moves through the valley in overlapping pulses, bouncing off the hills, amplifying until it becomes impossible to tell where one ends and the next begins. You've never heard anything like it, and that's saying something. Considering you once accidentally attended a didgeridoo metal fusion concert in Melbourne. That was loud. This is louder, but softer somehow, like the earth itself is harmonizing. And then the fog moves, not the wind, the herd. Dozens, maybe hundreds of lambiosaurs emerge from the haze in coordinated steps, their feet pressing rhythmic patterns into the mud. It's migration, but not the frantic, desperate kind of other species. This is measured, intentional, almost rehearsed. And as they march, they sing, each step punctuated by a call. Each call answered. It's prehistoric Morse code, except instead of tapping, they're blasting subwoofer notes from the tops of their skulls. You hear high-pitched tones from juveniles nestled between adults. Some low-bass tones you can't even hear, so much as feel like the rumble in your chest at a fireworks show. There's movement at every level. Parents nudging offspring adolescents, flaring their necks like they're showing off new scarves, and one older Lambiosaurus with a limp who still manages to keep perfect tempo with the rest. Historians still debate whether this migration pattern was seasonal, environmental, or cultural, if we can even use that word for dinosaurs. But what you're watching now feels more like a ritual than an escape. And then someone hits a sour note. A younger male just beginning to develop his adult crest lets loose a flat, honking wheeze that brings the whole chord progression to a halt. It's the musical equivalent of dropping your phone during a wedding vow. Some adults glance back, but only briefly. The rhythm picks back up. The younger one slinks between two ferns like a student kicked out of band class. Still, he tries again. This time quieter, more in key. You can't help but grin. There's perseverance in this swamp. Here's a historical tidbit to chew on. Fossil evidence shows that Lambiosaurine crests had a complex network of nasal passages, some so convoluted that air would travel nearly a meter inside the skull before emerging. It's one of the only known examples of an animal evolving its nose to sound cooler. And it worked. You shift your weight and notice something hidden in the fog, other creatures watching from the ridges. Not predators, just observers. Dryosaurs. A few little ankylosaurs. Even a distant pair of pterosaurs gliding overhead in circles like bored music critics. You wonder if they're here for safety or the show. Suddenly, two adult males break formation and face each other. The rest of the herd slows, stops. The fog thickens between them. It becomes a stage. They lower their heads back, legs digging into the soil, necks rigid. Then sound. A booming note blasts from the one on the left, long, smooth, almost romantic. The other answers with a sharper, punchier call that rises dramatically in pitch. The first replies quicker this time. The second overlays his next call with a tremolo effect that actually makes a juvenile behind you sneeze in surprise. It's a battle of breath. They don't move, don't charge, just play. Every call more elaborate than the last. You'd swear the second one throws in a quick triple note riff that earns a murmur of approval from a nearby female. There's tension in the air, but no violence, just vibration. One stumbles briefly, the note cracks, it's over. The first male, the smoother one, lets out a final triumphant bellow and returns to formation, tail swinging with what can only be described as swagger. The other bows his head. The migration resumes. And just like that, you realize this wasn't just a duel. It was a duet. They weren't competing for dominance. They were auditioning. Here's your odd fact of the hour. The New Zealand kakapo, a flightless parrot, uses booming vocal sacs to attract mates. And those booms can carry for several kilometers through valleys. One male kakapo was once tracked broadcasting his lonely love song to an entirely uninhabited stretch of forest. No one responded. Back in the fog, though, the Lambiosaurs don't sing alone. Their calls intertwine, rise, then fade into the trees like the trail of a comet. The entire migration seems to move with the tempo accelerating slightly after a particularly powerful note slowing when the harmonics shift toward the melancholy. You finally understand this isn't just a way to move, it's a way to remember, to pass knowledge across generations. Not just where to go, but how to go there. And as you watch their silhouettes disappear into the lightning mist, your ears still ringing, your heart still pacing to the rhythm of crest calls, one final note echoes behind them. Soft, solitary, a juvenile's voice still cracking, still trying, but getting closer every time. You've lost them. The last shimmering echoes of the herd have faded into the haze, swallowed by a valley that seems to bend sound as easily as it bends light. You're left in the quiet hum of insects, and distant water trickles what passes for silence in a Cretaceous marsh. Then behind you, two sharp blasts split the air. You jump and turn, half expecting another predator, half hoping it's just a Lambiosaurus practicing scales. Instead, it's two adult males squared off on a muddy plateau. Another crest duel. But this one's different. The males aren't strangers. Their crests are nearly identical, tall, curved like reversed sickles, with jagged ridges along the top that catch the morning sun like obsidian knives. Siblings rivals. Roommates with unresolved tension. Whatever they are, they're not here to croon. The first one belts out a blast so loud your teeth buzz. The other answers with a tighter nasal burst that almost sounds sarcastic. There's no rhythm this time, no harmony, just force. You realize now this isn't about courtship. It's not about coordination. It's about status. In human terms, it's less battle of the bands and more who can hold a high note without vomiting. And it's brutal. They circle each other's necks, flexing, nostrils flaring. With each call, their bodies vibrate not just from the sound but from the tension of breath control. These aren't just noises, they're weapons. One mistimed note, and it's game over. Historians still debate whether these vocal duels replaced physical combat or preceded it. Evidence of bone fractures on some Lambiosaur fossils suggests they could fight but rarely did. Instead, they bet on air. A mistaken song carried less risk than a misplaced stomp. One of the males takes a step closer and unleashes a three-part trill that makes your skull itch. The other tries to match it and immediately coughs. Oh no. You've never heard a dinosaur cough before, but it sounds a lot like someone trying to forcefully swallow soup while being chased. He lurches forward, his crest resonating with a broken kazoo sound. The winner steps back and belts one final perfectly timed note, like a mic drop. The loser wheezes once, stumbles into a puddle, and this is real, sneezes algae. You stifle a laugh. Somewhere nearby, a juvenile lets out a sympathetic bleat. Probably his kid. Odd fact break. In the wild, male bellbirds can sing louder than jackhammers. But many females reject the loudest suitors. Too much noise, not enough nuance. Nature doesn't always favor volume. Back in the clearing, the loser lumbers away, shaking his head, visibly embarrassed. The winner doesn't gloat, he just turns and rejoins a group of females with a subtle flourish of his tail like a jazz soloist returning to the stage. One of the females releases a soft tone in reply, brief but clear. You're not fluent in Lambiosaur, but if you had to translate, it'd be something like, "Okay, show off. We get it." The victor answers with a humble warble. Or a smug one. Hard to tell. You start to notice something else now. The crests themselves are scarred, not from combat, but from use. Tiny pockmarks, discolorations, even mineral deposits from years of blowing humid air through narrow winding tubes, like an old brass instrument stained by breath and rain. One crest even has what looks like a crack healed over but jagged. A battle wound. An overzealous solo. Scientists believe these crests had cartilage reinforcements and air sac linings to prevent injury, but clearly they weren't indestructible. You wonder how many notes it took to wear one down. The group slowly disperses. The duel is over. No one claps, but a few younger males attempt half-hearted warm-ups nearby like kids imitating their older brothers after a talent show. One even tries to replicate the victorious trill but comes out sounding like a punctured bagpipe. Still, the effort counts. And then from the trees comes a different sound. Clapping. You freeze. Lambeosaurs don't have hands for that. You turn and find a cluster of dryosaurs on a ridge watching silently. No clapping, just chewing. One lifts a leaf-covered branch and gives you a look that might as well say, well, that was something. Even the neighbors came for the show. Here's your historical tidbit. Ancient humans way down the timeline used bone flutes as early as 40,000 years ago. The oldest were made from vulture bones. Some anthropologists argue that music came before language. That rhythm predates speech. And here in this clearing, watching two thunder lizards throw down in a windpipe duel worthy of a battle anthem, you're inclined to believe it. The fog's lifted now. The air is clear, heavy with humidity and the aftermath of pride. The victorious Lambeosaurus tilts his head to the sky and releases one final call, not loud, not boastful, just resolved. A full-bodied sigh that says, I'm still the loudest thing here and I know it. You take a step back, then another. The spell is broken, the herd's moving on. You hear murmurs, now casual tones, musical side conversations, gossip in subsonic harmony. The symphony continues, but you'll always remember the sneeze. The air is thick with a stillness after the duel, a kind of hush that falls not from exhaustion but reflection. You drift through it following the herd at a respectful distance as they move from muddy flats to higher, drier ground. Morning light filters through the canopy in soft gold beams. The calls have quieted, replaced by the occasional snort or the rhythmic clomp of massive feet on mossy stone. You find them again near a bend in the river where the current slows and the vegetation thickens into a tangle of ferns, reeds, and something that smells vaguely like ancient cilantro. The herd has split slightly, the adults spreading out to graze and a smaller cluster forming in a shaded hollow beneath an overhanging ridge. You peer closer. The mothers are singing, not the grand resonant calls used during migration or defense. These are small private melodies, intimate and almost imperceptible. Their heads are low crests just above the ground, pointed delicately toward their hatchlings, curled in the mud like oversized chicks. You crouch beside a thick trunk covered in damp moss and strain your ears. You can just barely make it out, short, low-pitched pulses rising slightly at the end. Each sound is carefully timed, no two mothers overlapping. One stops, the other begins. The hatchlings wiggle and trill softly in response, their own voices squeaky and inconsistent but unmistakably mimicking the adults. It's lullaby hour. Historians still debate whether Lambeosaurs had parental bonding, similar to birds and mammals, but what you're watching could settle the argument. The language of family is tonal. The hatchlings seem soothed not just by proximity, but by melody. Some rock gently back and forth as if responding to rhythm. One, particularly fluffy-looking, leans its head into its mother's belly as she emits a long, slow note that hums in your chest. The baby squeaks back, a matching pitch, only sharper. This isn't teaching in the traditional sense. It's imprinting. Acoustic inheritance passed mouth to crest to tiny ear holes sealed with breath and belonging. You feel yourself soften, then immediately feel weird about softening in front of giant duck-faced dinosaurs. But you let it happen. One mother lifts her head and notices you. You freeze. Not in fear, just instinct. She doesn't run, doesn't call out, just studies you, eyes blinking slowly. Then she tilts her crest toward her babies and releases another low call. It curves downward, at the end like a whispered instruction. The hatchlings huddle closer. It's not for alarm. It's not even for warning. It's a boundary. You nod, stepping back slowly. You're not wanted here, and that's fair. Here's your oddball fact for the hour. Elephants have been known to use infrasonic rumbles to talk to each other, across miles of savanna tones so low we can't hear them, but they feel them through their feet. Mothers sometimes sing like this to their calves. Sound is a cradle, not just a call. Back in the hollow, a juvenile attempts a longer note. It backfires literally. A bubble of snot bursts from its nostril mid-call and lands squarely on its sibling. The targeted sibling lets out a squeal so indignant you momentarily forget where or when you are. It's the sound of betrayal. The mother lets out a short, sharp puff, and both hatchlings instantly freeze. One lowers its head, the other sits on its own tail and sulks. Even in the Cretaceous, mothers are fluent in "don't make me come over there." You step farther away following a gentle slope that leads you to a higher vantage point. From here, you can see more of the herd spread out across the basin, now basking in what little sun makes it through the canopy. A few adolescents chase each other lazily, their crests wobbling with every clumsy bound. And overhead, in a low crook of an ancient tree, a smaller creature rests, a pterosaur with a narrow snout and watchful eyes. It's not hunting, just observing. You half expect it to chirp a sarcastic commentary. Instead, it stretches one wing and settles back into its perch like a judge too tired to deliberate. Back below, a different kind of sound starts to rise. It's faint at first, more breath than tone. A juvenile trying to hum. You recognize it as one of the hatchlings from earlier, now a few steps away from the group, staring into a still pool. It opens its beak and lets out a long, careful note, then pauses. Then tries again, adjusting pitch slightly. You swear it's practicing. And nearby, from beneath a fern, another hatchling responds. They go back and forth, uncertain but enthusiastic, like two kids inventing a language before they've even learned their own. You feel a pang of something deeply human. Nostalgia, maybe. Or hope. Historians still debate whether lambeosaurs understood the concept of mimicry in an intentional sense, or if they were just echoing the sounds they grew up with. But what you're seeing here looks a lot like intent. Here's a bonus fact. Some modern songbirds will alter their songs depending on who's listening. Simpler for rivals, more complex for mates, and softer for their young. Communication isn't always about noise. It's about who you're making it for. The mothers begin to gather their young again, nudging them into loose circles. One mother pauses, leans toward her eldest, and releases a rich, rising tone. It's fuller than the others, almost like a question. The juvenile pauses, then answers. It's the same shape of sound, just deeper. You smile. He's growing up. As the herd begins to move again, the mothers fall into step behind the larger adults. The hatchlings cluster together, their little crests flickering like grass in the wind. Some continue to hum softly, not to call, but to remember. Because music, even ancient music, is a map of memory. And this swamp is filled with stories that never needed words. You wake to silence. That's how you know something's wrong. The swamp has always had a soundtrack, chirps, growls, distant calls. The basso hum of lambeosaur crests vibrating through the reeds like a throat-singing choir of titans. But now nothing. Even the wind holds its breath. You rise slowly, brushing dried fern bits from your shoulders. The air feels cooler. The light is thinner, filtered through dense clouds. It should be morning, but the sky says late storm or incoming trouble. Then you hear it. A call. Not a lambeosaurus. Not even close. This one is messy. Short, high-pitched, off-tempo. It scrapes the air like a beginner violinist stabbing a bow into a concrete wall. You scan the clearing and spot a juvenile lambeosaurus near the edge of a slow, dark stream. Alone. It calls again urgently this time, and then you realize it's repeating a tone from earlier, mimicking the sound its mother used to summon it. But no mother answers, because that's not the mother's call. Not really. It's bait. From behind a curtain of reeds, a shape slithers forward. Long, low, almost boneless in its fluidity. It's covered in mud and waterweed, and you can't make out the full body, just the movement, the gleam of a narrow eye and a mouth that opens slightly wider than it should. You swallow hard. This is not a predator you recognize. It shifts sideways quietly, and from its throat comes that same call again. almost convincing this time. Just a little too fast, like someone trying to impersonate a voice they've only heard once. The juvenile chirps back, hesitating. You want to yell, to throw something to run, but you're frozen in that terrible understanding that something smarter than it looks is actively pretending to be a Lambiosaurus child to eat a Lambiosaurus child. Historians still debate whether predatory mimicry existed among non-avian dinosaurs, but in the modern world, it's common enough. Burrowing owls imitate rattlesnake hisses. Margays fake baby monkey calls. And if evolution rewards clever liars, then you're staring at a masterclass in deceit. The predator inches closer. The juvenile takes one uncertain step forward. Then a sound cuts through the tension like a blade of sunlight. A short, sharp blast from the trees. An adult Lambiosaurus charges through the ferns with the full momentum of a freight train made of willpower and motherly rage. Its crest flashes in and out of the light. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't warn. It just plays the call, pure, piercing, unmistakable. The mimic freezes. It knows it's been caught. You finally see the full shape. A long, sinuous body, like a serpent mated with a lizard. Legs tucked close to its sides with a snout too narrow for a herbivore and too wide for subtlety. It releases a wet, rasping snarl and slides backward into the stream, disappearing as if the water had swallowed it. Gone, just like that. The juvenile stumbles toward its mother. She doesn't scold, doesn't sing, just walks in a tight circle around it once, then releases a low-frequency hum that you feel in your sternum. The juvenile copies it, badly, still counts. The swamp begins to breathe again, slowly, cautiously. You wonder how many times this has happened. How many predators have tried to play the part of a lost calf, a familiar call, a kind voice? And how many Lambiosaurs have learned to listen not just to the music, but through it? Odd fact for you, the fork-tailed drongo in Africa can mimic dozens of bird and mammal calls, often using them to distract animals and steal food. In experiments, some even change their mimicry after being found out. They're not just parrots, they're con artists with a remix button. You sit down by the stream, heart still thudding, and watch the mother and child fade into the trees. The reeds around the water rustle, but this time it's just wind. Probably. The mimic may be gone, but its lesson lingers. Sound here is more than communication. It's disguise. It's deception. It's defense. In a world before speech, it's the first weapon, the first lie, the first promise. And for all the crests and chords and beautiful harmonies, even the most musical creature must learn when a song isn't a song at all. From deeper in the woods, the herd resumes its chorus. Tones rise in cautious cadence. You hear notes of warning now, short-clipped, laced with static. Then a low chord, probably from an elder, cuts across the tension like a drumbeat, signaling we're okay now. The valley listens and calms. You lean back against a moss-covered rock and close your eyes. But your ears stay wide open. It begins with a stillness so complete you swear even the trees are holding their breath. One moment the marsh is its usual self-soggy musical, occasionally rude. The next it's muted, not silent in the comforting way a forest sometimes is, but in that heavy pressing way that makes the skin on your arms tighten like it's listening harder than you are. The Lambiosaurs seem to feel it too. The elder pauses mid-graze. A juvenile halts in the middle of a game, 1 foot hovering mid-air. Even the fern stops swaying, though there's no wind to blame for that. Then thunder, not the distant theatrical rumble you hear before rain. This is close, immediate, a crack that shakes the trees and sends birds you didn't even know were there flapping skyward in a panic. You look up. The sky's gone black at the edges. A pulse of wind follows the sound. It smells like lightning and panic and crushed greenery. The air goes damp all at once. Then the rain starts, not gentle drops, not even big summer splashes, but sheets. Water hammers down with enough force to bend reeds flat and turn every dirt patch into chocolate soup in under a minute. And with the rain, the music dies. The Lambiosaurs don't vocalize. They don't move, they just brace. You crouch under the curled root of an old tree, soaked instantly. You can barely see 5 feet in front of you now. Water sluices down your face and every breath you take tastes like wet bark. A flash splits the sky so close it paints the swamp in a frozen white snapshot. In that flash you see them, the herd gathered tightly on a patch of elevated ground, heads low, crests tilted down, not toward danger, but toward each other. And that's when you realize something astonishing. They're not silent. They're humming. Not out loud, but through their bodies. The rain muffles sound, but you can feel it in your bones. Faint vibrations traveling through the mud, echoing through shallow pools and root networks. The lambeosaurs have shifted their communication to the ground. Subsonic resonance, like seismic lullabies. Historians still debate whether lambeosaurs were capable of infrasonic messaging, but modern elephants and even crocodiles use it to talk through long distances when the air's too loud. And here in the storm's roar, the echoes remain. A juvenile stumbles and squeals, loud, panicked. The elder steps close and presses its flank gently against the little ones. A pause, then a soft note. Audible this time, short, comforting. The juvenile repeats it quieter, more controlled. The sound is swallowed by the storm, but you feel it under your feet. Odd fact for the soaked and shivering in 2007, scientists recreated the sound of a Lambeosaurus crest by using a CT scan and digital airflow simulations. The result: a tone surprisingly close to a tubo warming up underwater. Add thunder, and you're basically here. The ground trembles again, but this time it's not thunder. It's floodwater. From your low perch you watch as the river swells in seconds. What was once a gentle trickle is now a roaring, muddy beast chewing through everything in its path. Logs, reeds, small trees, all gone. The herd isn't in immediate danger yet, but the water's coming fast. The leader calls. Loud! Clear! The kind of tone that would slice glass if you had any. Instantly, the herd begins to shift, not with chaos, but with urgency. They're not just fleeing, they're orchestrating their escape. You follow, feet slipping in the muck, vision blurred by sideways rain. You scramble behind the herd as they ascend a ridge covered in slick stone and tangled roots. The sound of their crests returns not melodic but rhythmic. Blasts iced evenly used to keep everyone moving, counting steps. You'd compare it to a metronome if that didn't make you want to slap your old piano teacher. At one point, a juvenile tumbles in the mud. A nearby adult lets out a sharp pulse and 2 others flank the little one, lifting it back to its feet using nothing but body positioning and gentle nudges. No time for sentiment, but still care. When they reach the top of the rise, the leader turns and gives one final blast. Below, the flood consumes the old trail, muddy brown and violent. The ridge shakes, but holds. The herd exhales. Then they rest. No calls, no songs, just breathing. You collapse nearby, dripping and numb. Water trickles down your spine like an over-enthusiastic horror movie sound cue. Your hands are shaking from the cold, or maybe from everything else. And yet, even in this drenched quiet, you hear something. A soft tone. One juvenile head lowered, crest vibrating gently. A second joins, then a third. It's not a song. It's not a warning. It's memory. Like children humming to remember a tune that calmed them once. You realize they're recreating the rhythm of the ground tone their elders used during the storm. It's crude, patchy, but sincere. Because survival isn't just making it out alive. It's remembering what kept you alive. You don't move for a long time. The rain tapers to a drizzle, and the flood below begins to ease into swollen quiet. From your perch on the ridge, everything below looks rearranged tracks, erased roots uprooted, 1,000 years of leaves swept away in an afternoon. But the air is different now, sharper, clean in that raw post-storm way, like the world's just been scrubbed with a wire brush, and the silence is deeper than before. The lambeosaurs stay still for hours, not sleeping, watching, breathing. 1 or 2 emit a gentle exhale through their crests, but it's not music. It's more like a sigh through a broken flute. You climb down slowly, mud clinging to your boots like regret. As you explore the fringes of what used to be the trail, something catches your eye. A pile of debris, branches, tangled roots, and fossil-colored stone. And sticking out of it, a crest. Not attached to a skull. Not attached to anything, really. Just a fragment, partially fossilized but unmistakable in its curvature. Smooth on the outside, ribbed and fluted within. You kneel and brush it gently, and your fingers find the hollow chamber that once carried air and voice and meaning. You glance back at the herd. Then cautiously, you raise the fragment to your lips. Stupid, yes. Gross, probably. But you're not going to not try. You blow. Nothing. You try again, adjusting the angle. This time the air catches. The fragment sings. A low, ghostly tone drifts out, soft, resonant, almost accidental. But it echoes. You feel it spiral outward like a ripple, moving not just through space but time. A few lambeosaurs lift their heads. One of them answers, you freeze. Not sure if you should be honored or terrified. It was just a breath through a rock, but they heard it and recognized it. Somewhere in that tone, something ancestral survived. Historians still debate whether the shapes of these crests changed gradually over time to match new frequencies or if they followed more chaotic trends. But this one, it works. Even now divorced from flesh and lungs and instinct, it still produces a sound that means something. Here's your odd fact. In 2016, archaeologists discovered a 20,000-year-old conch shell in a French cave that, when played like a horn, produced 3 distinct notes. They believe it was used for ceremonies or music, possibly both. Sound is long-lived. You place the crest gently in your satchel, not as a souvenir, as a reminder. Farther down the slope, you hear movement. A small group of lambeosaurs is investigating the altered landscape, pushing at uprooted logs, sniffing waterlogged hollows. Their calls are tentative probing, not quite melodies, more like sonar pings. You realize they're mapping again, relearning their world through vibration. One juvenile approaches a freshly cleared pond and dips its head. A moment later, it lifts its crest and blows a simple low tone across the water. The sound trembles slightly. Maybe the angle is wrong. It tries again. Smoother this time. Across the water, a larger female answers. You recognize her, the one who defended her young from the mimic days earlier. Her call is lower, more complex, woven with undertones. The juvenile's eyes widen. It mimics her rhythm imperfectly. You can almost see the connection sound as bridge. It's beautiful and fleeting, because then you hear it an echo that doesn't belong. A note comes back from the far end of the marsh, but it's wrong. Slower, artificial. Another mimic, not the one from before. This one's clumsier, louder. The call carries uncertainty, like someone testing a word they don't fully understand. The herd stiffens, but they don't panic. Instead, the elders raise their heads. One by one, they blow deep, solid notes, not alarms, but declarations, identifying themselves. Claiming space, daring anything listening to come closer. And then, silence. No reply. It's like the marsh itself took a breath and thought better of it. Still, the herd doesn't resume its melody. Not yet. You hear one of the juveniles mutter a soft, gliding tone, softer than before. The others pick it up, barely more than vibrations. The adults remain quiet. You realize the young ones are practicing again, rebuilding their library of sounds, but this time layered with caution. The mimic taught them something, and the flood taught them more. Sound is a language, but it's also a fingerprint. Too much mimicry and you're exposed. Too little and you disappear. Somewhere in between is identity, and identity here is sung. As dusk creeps over the horizon, the sky turns copper and gray, streaked with soot-colored clouds. The herd begins to settle again. One by one, the lambeosaurs lie down in the mudnecks, curled crests lowered to the ground. And for the first time since the flood, one of them sings. Just one note. Then another answers. Not from panic, not from warning, but from memory, from relief. You don't try the fossil crest again. Some songs aren't meant for your breath. By morning, the herd is already on the move again. You follow at a respectful distance, watching how they regroup without fuss. No alpha, no shouting, just tones exchanged like well-worn handshakes. A soft chirp to start the day, a long tone to signal direction. Even the juveniles walk in rhythm, no need for scolding. Each step seems guided by invisible sheet music only they can read. And then you see them. Another herd. Lambeosaurs, smaller, framed with shorter crests and lighter coloration. They emerge from the far tree line like a second stanza entering the score. You hear them before you fully see them. Their voices are familiar but not the same. Their notes twist differently, rising into softer arches instead of sharp curves. This is something new. You duck behind a fallen log as the two groups notice each other. Neither approaches right away. The air fills with song. No, not song, tuning. One from each group begins to emit tones, single stable notes at intervals. A kind of call and response that doesn't escalate, doesn't rush. Just two languages brushing up against each other, looking for common phrases. Historians still debate whether these tonal exchanges between herds were territorial or diplomatic. What you're seeing feels more like the cautious handshake between old choirs who've forgotten each other's verses. Odd fact of the hour, whales from different pods have unique dialects. When two groups meet, they sometimes shift their songs temporarily to better match. It's not surrender, it's sync. That's what's happening here. You watch as the elders from both herds step forward, not close enough to touch but within view. They dip their heads and begin a low hum together. The pitch converges slowly. One steps up, releases a longer note. The other pauses and matches. The rest of the herd joins in. It starts with the adults' slow, patient tones of alignment. Then the younger ones begin to answer, weaving their voices through the pattern like threads. The juveniles stumble at first. One lets out a sharp wheeze that clearly didn't get the memo, but they catch on. The whole swamp turns into a duet. But it's more than performance. It's evolution in action. Because you realize something. The visiting herd's crests are shorter, but the range they cover higher, more agile, like flutes versus cellos. And the original herd deeper, longer calls, a fuller bass-heavy register. Together, they don't cancel out, they expand. Scientists believe lambeosaurine crests varied between species not just for identification, but potentially for forming massive migratory sound networks. A whole system of tuned skulls coordinating across miles. The marsh becomes a concert. The fog drifts in again, not as thick, just enough to soften the light and make the sounds feel larger than life. It's like the atmosphere itself is listening. You close your eyes, not out of exhaustion this time, but reverence. The two herds begin to merge slowly, naturally. They don't form ranks, they just realign. One adult from the visiting group joins the edge of the first. A juvenile from the main herd peels off to join a cluster of new playmates. There's no fanfare, just music. You catch sight of a particularly old female from the second herd. Her crest is worn misshapen, but when she sings it rings out with perfect clarity. She doesn't match either group's tone. She adds to it, a third harmony line. It's disorienting. Then it's beautiful. She's not confused, she's advanced. This is what happens when sound outlives scars. And then a funny thing happens. Two juveniles, one from each herd, start goofing off. At first, they try to outcall each other, trading increasingly ridiculous notes like kids one-upping fart noises. Then one of them tries to sing through a pile of wet leaves, which makes a kind of trombone sneeze effect that startles a nearby adult into huffing, like a deflating bellows. It breaks the formality. Now everyone's a little looser. More tones bubble up. Laughter tones, questioning ones. The kind of random playful noise that says we're not strangers anymore. And just when you think it's done, when the herds have blended as much as they will, you hear it. A new note. Long, twisting, multi-toned. It's not from one dinosaur. It's from two. One adult from each herd, standing close now, crests tilted just right. They're harmonizing, deliberately. creating a sound no single animal could produce. And it doesn't sound like the past. It sounds like the future. You want to cheer, but instead you just sit back against a tree root and let it wash over you. You're drenched in mist and noise and prehistoric breath. And for the first time, you're not just witnessing history, you're listening to it rewrite itself. Skip forward a few million years. The marsh is gone, the herds are gone, the music is gone, but not completely. You're standing in a dusty field surrounded by humans with clipboards and sunburns staring down at a trench in the earth. At the bottom of the pit, partially encased in sandstone and stubborn dirt, is a Lambiosaurus skull, tilted slightly like it's trying to listen. One of the grad students calls it the saxophone of doom, which feels both disrespectful and correct. The crest is mostly intact. Hollow, smooth, elegantly curved. The excavation team hasn't figured out how to extract it yet, but someone in the lab got bored or inspired and 3D printed a replica. A big hollow model based on CT scans. Tubes for air ridges for tone a speaker for the lungs it doesn't have. And they're going to play it. You're there! Of course you're there. You've heard the real thing. You felt it. But the others, they think it's just an experiment. They have no idea what they're about to wake up. The technician hooks up an air compressor to the fake crest and taps a few keys on a laptop. We've preloaded the pitch range, he says. Should sound like an angry goose crossed with a foghorn. He presses a button, and the crest sings. A long, drawn-out note bursts from the speaker and funnels through the artificial passageways, emerging as something rich, round, and eerie. The sound warbles slightly, probably the software, but it works. Heads turn, eyes widen. A kid drops their juice box. Then they run it again. This time shorter pulses, two in quick succession, then a pause. A woman watching near the back blinks rapidly. It sounds like it's saying something she says quietly. No one responds. Because it does. It sounds familiar. Not like words, but like intent. They play another sequence. Lower tones now. The compressor hums, the crest vibrates, and the sound drifts across the field like a memory you didn't know you had. Here's your odd fact in 2020. Researchers recreated the voice of an ancient Egyptian priest by 3D printing his vocal tract. The result, a single vowel sound, that's all, but it was enough to haunt every museum for a week. Back in the field, the technicians switch settings. They've inputted a frequency curve meant to replicate distress based on assumptions, of course, because no one's ever heard a Lambiosaurus cry for help. Until now. They hit play. The crest lets out a strained, echoing warble. A rising pitch, then a sharp drop-off. It's not loud, but it hurts. You feel it more than you hear it, like a ghost shoving past your ribs. The sound fades. The laptop beeps. Everyone stares at the crest. Then from the edge of the dig site, a deer bolts from the woods. Legs flailing, ears back, vanishing into the brush without so much as a backward glance. A long silence. Okay, someone says. That's probably not good. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had complex vocal communication systems like modern whales or songbirds. But what you're listening to isn't just communication. It's memory carved in calcium. A sound-shaped fossil. A man in a wide hat steps forward. Let's try one of the harmonics from the adult pairing scenario, he says. You almost stop them, but they press the button. The speaker purrs. They air pulses. The crest sings again, two notes this time, winding, rising, wrapping around each other like vines. And somewhere in the forest, something answers back. Not exactly, not even closely. But the response has shape, rhythm. It rides the air like a lost echo clawing its way home. Everyone freezes. You step back instinctively because you've heard that pattern before. In the marsh, on the ridge, between two Lambiosaurs trying to sync for the first time. It doesn't make sense. Nothing should be alive that remembers this. And yet, odd fact, in 2018, scientists found that baby crocodiles still respond to playback of contact calls from extinct croc relatives, calls they've never heard before. Built-in memory, sound that lives in DNA. So maybe what answered wasn't a creature. Maybe it was the place. Or maybe something never left. The researchers start arguing, debating audio bounce, compression, bleed, wildlife reaction times. You take one last look at the crest, mud-stained hollow, loyal to a voice that hasn't breathed in 75 million years, and you walk away. Because some songs aren't meant to be remixed, and not everything that answers you is alive. The light is different now. Not just dimmer, but older, softer. Like the world is folding in on itself, settling into a dusk so ancient even the trees seem to bow. You've returned to the marsh, not the dig site, not the recreation, the real one. The sky swells purple with streaks of molten red, and the shadows have lengthened into memories. The Lambiosaurus herd stands still at the crest of a low ridge. No one moves, no one sings, except one. The elder. She's thin now, not sick but spent. Her crest, once a bold arc of resonance, is weathered, dulled at the edges. She doesn't walk like the others anymore. She glides, bones, doing only what's necessary. Every step deliberate like punctuation. You follow at a distance, mud tugging at your heels like it doesn't want you to see what's coming. The herd doesn't follow her. They watch, and she knows. She ascends a slope you've never noticed before, barren, rocky, too exposed for comfort. But maybe that's the point. You keep your distance, crouched behind a low outcrop, heart thudding too loudly for this quiet. At the summit, she pauses. No sound. Then she lifts her head and plays her final song. The tone rises slowly. A spiral of low notes, threaded with strange overtones. It vibrates through the stone, through your chest, through something deeper. It's not a call. It's not even music in the usual sense. It's memory. A full life braided into one long breath. Her crest glows faintly in the evening light. As the sound curves into the wind, catches it, bends it, becomes part of it. You realize she's not just singing, she's leaving instructions. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had rituals for death. Most argue no, too anthropomorphic. But what you're seeing isn't ritual for the sake of belief. It's information. A sonic archive. She's embedding her final knowledge into the world through tone. And the herd listens. Down below, the others stay frozen. The juveniles sit. The adults bow their heads. Not one voice rises to join hers. This is hers alone. You've seen elephants do it, stand over their dead, brush bones with their trunks. You've heard that crows bring gifts to fallen kin. But this is prehistoric eulogy sung in breath, carried on wind, etched into dusk. She plays 3 final tones, one long, one short, one that trembles like a last heartbeat. Then silence. She lowers her head and lies down, slow, without drama, without pain. Just completion. The wind changes. The tones hang a moment longer in the air, then fade. You wait, expecting something movement, sound, ritual. But the herd does nothing for nearly an hour. Then as the stars begin to pierce the purple veil above, one juvenile steps forward. Quiet, small. He walks to the hill, climbs halfway, stops, then lifts his head and hums. Just one note. Thin, high, not ready, but brave. A few seconds pass. Then another juvenile joins. Then another. The tones overlap, not in harmony, not yet. But they're trying. Testing the shapes of sound, passed down through a final breath. Like kids tracing the outline of a symbol they don't fully understand. And then one adult joins them. The call is full-bodied, round, gentle. It threads through the juvenile's notes like a parent holding hands. And suddenly the air is filled with song again, but this time it's soft. Scattered. A dozen half-formed voices learning how to mourn. Or maybe just how to remember. You close your eyes. Not because you're tired, but because you don't want to interrupt. Odd fact, the satin bowerbird learns its mating call not from instinct, but by listening to others. Young males spend years practicing in solitude before performing. Some die before ever mastering the song. Some songs, after all, aren't meant to be sung alone. The herd doesn't leave her body. Not yet. They rest around the hilltop. No cries, no distress, just presence. Her final tone lingers not in air anymore, but in them. You know this because you feel it too. In the hush that follows, you realize something. You'll hear that final call forever. even when you close your ears, even when you forget the shape of her crest or the color of the sky or the weight of the silence. Because some sounds aren't heard, they're kept. The herd does move on. Eventually, they leave the elder behind, not buried, not forgotten, but placed. The hill becomes hers, guarded by silence, marked by a rhythm no predator dares disturb. No scavengers touch the body. Perhaps it's the scent. Perhaps it's the sound. Or maybe some unspoken rule holds even in the most ancient corners of the wild. You follow the herd once more, legs aching, head echoing with the ghost note of that final song. You expect the calls to return in full, a return to structure, to migration, to survival. But they don't. Not right away. Instead, there's a quiet learning. The juveniles walk slower now, more thoughtful. They still call, but in shorter phrases, fragments, as if testing not just the shape of sound, but its weight. The adults rarely reply. They listen. Let the young find the melody again in their own way. The trail leads through a dry stretch of forest. Burnt trunks, fallen logs, insect chatter layered like background static. You wonder if this is where she grew up, the elder whose song is still caught in your ribs. And then faint at first, a new tone rises. Not from the herd, from the distance. You stop. So does the lead adult. The call is strange, flatter with abrupt shifts. No melody, just structure. It repeats perfectly spaced. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. Another herd. The adults look at one another, crest twitching, flaring faintly in the light. Then, without cue, they all respond in unison, a simple two-note sequence, bright and clear. The reply comes instantly, but not in harmony. In imitation. Exactly the same pattern. The adult next to you emits a soft, uncertain trill. Historians still debate whether mimicry between herds was used for deception or diplomacy. What's clear is that someone is trying to match what they think they're hearing, and failing. You hear it too, subtle differences in timbre and tone, like a language copied by someone who doesn't know what the words mean. Then you see them. A small cluster of lambiosaurs appears between the trees. 4 or 5 at most. All juveniles, no adults. Their crests are underdeveloped, their gait awkward. One limps. Another is visibly underweight. Orphans, lost or left behind, no way to tell. They hear your herd's reply again, and this time, one steps forward and calls, "It's rough, uncoordinated," but this time closer. The lead female in your herd walks forward. She doesn't call, she simply stands. Then, very slowly, she emits a single tone. It's not the reply she gave before. It's hers, personal, gentle, almost parental. The juvenile stops, listens, then shakily answers with its own version. The lead female steps forward again, closer. Another adult joins her. This isn't performance. It's welcome. Odd fact, orca pods will sometimes adopt stranded calves from other groups, teaching them new vocalizations while allowing them to keep elements of their old dialect. They don't erase the past, they merge it. That's what's happening here. One by one, your herd responds not in unison, but individually. Each adult offers a call unique, but warm. Invitations, not instructions. The orphans don't run, they don't challenge, they just approach. When the two groups finally stand together, there's a long pause. No one sings. Then the limping juvenile lifts its head and tries again. The note it sings is wrong in all the right ways, off-pitch, half-formed, staggered in rhythm, but it's also brave. It doesn't mimic anymore. It offers. And one adult lowers her crest, angles it perfectly, and responds, "It's not correction. It's conversation." And then the air is filled with sound again. Not loud, not rehearsed, just curious. Two herds becoming one, not through force or fear, but through the slow weaving of shared tone. It doesn't matter what they called themselves before. Now, they'll learn each other. You sit back watching the sky shift from amber to soft steel gray. A breeze rustles the tall grass, adding its own percussive hum to the moment. You catch yourself humming along a low human note shaped not by crest but by heart. For the first time in hours, you hear laughter. Not from you, from the juveniles. One of them toots out a short, ridiculous squawk that ends in what can only be described as a prehistoric raspberry. Another chases him. The adults sigh in deeply familiar tones of resignation. And just like that, the music isn't just back, it's evolving. Because music isn't made by perfection, it's made by trying. Together, the herd has changed. You don't notice it all at once, but in the way melodies shift so gradually that by the final note you can't remember how they began. The calls are warmer now, softer in the mornings, steadier at dusk. The adults don't just call to each other, they call with each other, harmonizing like a living wind chime that has finally caught its breeze. The orphans fit in now. You'd be hard-pressed to tell who came from where. Crests have grown slightly. Their voices are still awkward but filled with confidence, now the kind that only comes from being answered. One afternoon, as the sun reaches its golden arc, the entire herd pauses on a rise overlooking the valley. Below, open plains, new vegetation, pale rivers threading between low hills. They're hesitating. This is the edge of their known territory. Past this is migration ground likely abandoned by now, too dry, too distant. But something is drawing them forward. Maybe memory. Maybe the rhythm of a place they've never seen but have somehow always sung about. The lead adult, a large male with a swept-back crest shaped like a curled leaf, takes the first step down. He doesn't call. Instead, one of the juveniles does. It's a tiny voice, high, fragile, but it starts the chain. One note, then two. Then the herd answers, not in chorus, not in layers, but in rounds, like voices passed from one to another. Each new call adds a slight variation, a new rhythm, a borrowed beat. The pattern grows more intricate, more alive. And then they begin to move. This isn't migration as before. This is procession. Each step matches the tempo of a note. Each call punctuates motion. You've seen military drills. You've seen dance troupes. But this is neither. This is remembering through movement, a choreography of survival. Here's your historical tidbit. Some ancient human societies, like those of Polynesian navigators, used rhythm and chant not just for ceremony, but for wayfinding. Singing kept them on course, mapped currents in the sea, and anchored time across generations. That's what the lambeosaurs are doing, singing their way across the unknown. You trail them from a ridge, marveling at how the sound changes with the landscape. In forested gullies, their notes are sharper, compressed between the trees. In open plains, they stretch long and low, rolling over the ground like mist. Then at night, something new happens. One of the orphans, older now, his crest growing into a distinct arc, climbs a rock outcrop under the moon and begins to hum. Not loudly, not even confidently, just a pattern. 3 notes, then silence, then again. He's inventing something. The others listen. At first, nothing. Then one responds, copying the pattern exactly. Another follows, changing the last note. Within minutes, you hear the herd begin to build the melody, each lambeosaur adding or removing a beat, a rise, a drop. They're composing, not mimicking, making. You sit down in the tall grass, grinning like a lunatic. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it's happening right now. In real time. An extinct species, long buried by silence, is writing a song. The tone drifts through the valley like smoke. The moon hangs full and low, catching in the fog. You can't tell how many are singing now. Dozens. All of them. The rhythm syncs with your heartbeat. And you remember something from earlier, something you dismissed. The answer in the forest. The echo that wasn't just air. What if it wasn't a fluke? What if songs leave trails? Odd fact, scientists recently discovered that humpback whale songs evolve over time and spread across entire oceans. A melody created near Australia can reach the Pacific Islands within 2 years. The song becomes a passport. So what if this one reaches something else? You lie back in the grass, eyes closed, letting the Lambeosaurus chorus pass over you like waves. The wind moves with the music. The insects chirp in strange sync. Somewhere behind you, even the stream seems to pulse with rhythm. It's as if the whole world is leaning in to listen. And just as you start to drift off, you hear one final note, far, far off. It doesn't match. It's older, slower, like a drum left in a cave for too long. But it's aware. The herd goes quiet for a moment, not afraid, not confused, just alert. And then the orphan at the top of the ridge answers. One note, a welcome, a door held open in sound. The call echoes outward, and something answers back. The dawn doesn't rise. It builds. First in silence, just the cool stretch of light brushing the edges of tree trunks and pooled water, like fingers testing a keyboard, long unplayed. Then gradually the sky begins to hum. You swear it does. A low vibration under everything. And the lambeosaurs feel it too. The herd gathers again in an open basin rimmed with tall reeds and violet-colored stones. They stand in loose circles, not grazing, not traveling, just waiting. The orphan from the ridge stands at the front now. Not the leader, but not in the back anymore either. His crest is shaped like a bent river, a unique curve sharp on one side, sweeping on the other. And when he calls, it's with full breath. 3 notes, the same ones he invented the night before. And then the herd answers. The response is immediate, note for note, beat for beat, but richer now. Adults add deeper tones beneath his phrase. Juveniles layer theirs on top, weaving complexity around his melody. It spreads not like wildfire, but like roots. Outward, beneath, then everywhere at once. The sound isn't just echoing anymore. It's resonating. The stones pick it up. The water vibrates. A bird launches from a nearby tree with a startled cry, then seems to mimic part of the tune in its flight. The air feels denser. You close your eyes, and for the first time you feel the world not as landscape or story or sequence, but as song, layered, shared, passing from crest to crest, footstep to footstep, even heartbeat to breath. Something answers again, closer now. From beyond the northern ridge comes a reply not from lambeosaurs. The voice is deeper, more pulsing, almost drum-like, but it carries the rhythm of the herd's new melody. It's been picked up, passed on. Somewhere out there, something is listening and repeating. A second voice joins it. This one higher, less defined. You can't see what's making the sounds, it doesn't matter. You feel the herd's tension rise, not in fear, but recognition. The orphan calls again, and this time he adds a new note, unfamiliar, complex, almost too long, but confident. Like throwing a bridge into the dark, hoping something is waiting on the other side. A long pause. Then the answer comes back. Exact. Historians still debate whether musical structure could be considered cultural in dinosaurs. But if culture means a shared behavior passed through generations, modified, taught, remembered, then what you're witnessing now is the birth of a civilization. Here's your odd fact: parrots in captivity have been known to create unique names for themselves, whistles that are then recognized by others. Identity encoded in sound. What if that's what you're hearing? Not just greeting, not just echo, but names. You step back slowly, letting the music expand. You no longer understand the parts, too many layers now, too many species. But that's the point. The melody has grown beyond its origin. The herd doesn't move. They listen, as if waiting for something else. Not noise, not recognition. Harmony. And when it comes, it's quiet. A final tone, simple, deep, so low it might be just wind. But it fits. The orphan turns to look at you briefly. Just one eye blinking slowly, as if to say, "Did you hear that?" You nod. Because you did. And the herd begins to walk. No urgency, no fear, just continuation. You stay behind this time. You've heard what you needed to. They pass through the mist with their music, still swelling voices, fading into the trees, into time, into myth. Until at last, the world returns to quiet. But now it's a different kind of quiet. It holds memory. It holds song. And it waits. Somewhere in the mists of time, among the reeds and the floodplains, a species of crested dinosaurs found a way to speak without words. The lambeosaurs with their hollow, resonating skulls transformed breath into music. They sang to navigate, to warn, to court, to mourn. And as you journeyed beside them, step by rhythm, note by storm, you discovered that their crests were more than biological oddities. They were instruments. They were memory chambers. From the solemn rituals of mothers whispering to hatchlings to predator mimicry that turned their own language against them, every moment in the marsh proved one thing. Sound was survival. When a storm silenced the valley, the herd turned to vibration. When fossils were uncovered millions of years later, human breath woke songs that had slept for epochs. And through all this, you watched one orphaned juvenile invent new music. Not because it was needed, but because it was possible. Because life isn't just inherited, it's remade. And music is the most ancient form of that renewal. When the final notes rose into the sky and returned in echoes not their own, you understood. The past isn't gone. It's not even silent. It's just waiting for someone to play the first note again. And someone always will.